Hello, hello, Brie Sodano here, live, coming to you from my business page and my YouTube page. And I'm actually in the group with this amazing software called StreamYard. All right, so today I am actually going to be working on the content for my book. So you guys probably know that I'm writing a book. And so I'm going to deliver some of the content and then we're going to get it edited and transcribed. So if you are watching live with me, please engage in the comments. Let me know what's going on, but I probably am not going to answer you back right away because we have to transcribe this. So that'll make it a little bit more complicated. So what we're going to be talking about today is the lies that we believe about money and basically like what it actually takes to be financially successful. So that's what we are about to get into. So I'm excited that you're here. All right. So the biggest lie and one of the most damaging ideas that we have about money is that money is common sense, black and white, simple math. And the reason that this is so damaging is that it's not the way that humans behave. Like that idea would imply that your conscious brain is in charge of all aspects of your life, and it's not. So this ends up causing a lot of self-talk that's really negative that actually reinforces bad behaviors. And it feels bad. It feels like there's something wrong with you if you can't manage your money well. It feels like there's something like, like I'm bad at money. I don't have willpower. I somehow suck at life because I'm having trouble managing money. Now, money is incredibly complex in our day-to-day lives because it impacts nearly every decision that we make. So ideas that you could just make yourself a budget and have a financial plan are really, it's a really good idea to have a financial plan, but the idea that those plans will just very easily play out just simply because you have a plan is it's a damaging idea. It's not only untrue, but then it makes you feel inadequate when your plans don't work out. So what I want to talk about is what it actually requires, like what solid money management skills actually require. So the first thing that money mastery requires is communication between your conscious brain and your unconscious brain, your subconscious. Now, in a minute, I'm going to get into really the differences between the two. But your subconscious brain is in charge of your emotions, your body. Like if I want to move my arm, that's a subconscious action. Your conscious brain is in charge of planning, higher reasoning, like reading books. And so we often make these plans in the conscious part of our brain with no regard for the part of your brain that's actually going to execute. So your conscious brain is going to make the plans, your subconscious brain is going to execute. And when the subconscious brain is not included in any of those plans, they're basically doomed to fail, right? If you've ever said, I'm going to be so good, I'm going to be so good this week, I'm going to make my lunch. And then you actually do make the lunch. But then your coworker's like, I'm going to order takeout. Do you want chicken wings? And you're like, yes, please. And then you throw your sandwich away. Anybody ever do that? That's evidence of a disconnect. If you've ever actually caught yourself taking an action and your brain is like, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Stop. We said we're not going to do this anymore. And you're actively doing it. That's a disconnect between those two parts of your brain. It means the conscious brain wants something, the subconscious brain wants something else, and the subconscious brain is way bigger and way stronger and will win that fight every single time. All right. So willpower is the idea that your conscious brain can manually override your subconscious brain. And here's why that's not a strong plan. And with money, food, anything else that you're trying to make changes on, that's not a solid plan. And the reason is that one, your conscious brain is off most of the time. Your subconscious brain, you have a lot of autopilots put in your brain. You have a lot of habits that run the show. Your brain wants to preserve glucose. It's the fuel that it needs. And so your conscious brain, because it's doing new things all the time, requires a lot of glucose. Your subconscious brain is like, well, we've made coffee 54 times. And you actually don't need to make it 54. Like, we've made coffee with this coffee pot 3 or 4 times. We know exactly what to do. Habit loop in place. Wake up, trigger, routine, make coffee, reward, coffee, that. And so your brain puts these habits in place. So the idea that your conscious brain is going to catch the actions of your subconscious is not always, you're not always going to catch it. You're not always going to catch those habits with your conscious brain. Sometimes they're going to fly by underneath the radar. The second reason that willpower is not a strong strategy is because willpower requires a massive amount of glucose. And so there's only so much glucose you have in your brain every single day. And so you can manually override, like the conscious brain can willpower over the subconscious like once or twice. And it's some science says that it's like a muscle and you can build it up over time. I actually don't see a lot of evidence of that being true in my practice. I feel like what I see is clients being able to do it a couple times. You can use willpower a couple times in a day, but really it's your money impacts nearly every decision. So if you were going to try to use willpower, you're going to run out of mental steam. You're going to be exhausted. It's not going to work. So that's that. Then the thing is too, is that money really does impact nearly every decision that you're going to make throughout your day. Money impacts, what clothes you're going to wear. Your financial status literally impacts nearly everything that you're going to decide to do in a given day. Most decisions have at least a financial nod. At least you're going to at least pay attention. Even if money's not the deciding factor, there's at least going to be a mental note of the finances required because it's a resource. So your plans for how to manage money need to include, there's a lot of habit work to do. There's just a lot going on. And so you want to make sure that you really have a holistic approach, because just a plan is wildly inadequate for actually making big changes and progressing financially. Now, money is also a highly emotional decision. And I'll tell you from my experience that when I work with clients and we're talking about their money, it's the easiest thing in the world. I'm like, yeah, let me see these numbers. All right, I know exactly what to do. And I can tell you with absolute certainty the best way to manage a financial situation. What are your goals? What's going on? What are we doing with this math? All right, cool. The thing is that I do this work. And sometimes even for me, even though I'm fully aware of what scarcity feels like, and I do a lot of personal development work, sometimes I still need to consult with somebody just because I can feel that my emotions really have a hold of me. I've talked with clients who are treasurers managing $100 million budgets, but can't manage their $6,000 a month. And the reason is because when you're making the choices about your life, it's very emotional. It's not black and white money. So if you've ever felt conflicted with yourself, like you really want to buy something, but you really don't want to spend the money, or you've ever felt excited about spending money, or you've ever felt stressed and horrified about spending money, those emotions very much play into the decisions. And those emotions are not simple black and white. And when you start to pay attention to the emotional states that you're in, when you're making your decisions, you're infinitely more powerful in your ability to make good choices with your money. All right, so now I want to talk about the difference between the conscious brain and the subconscious brain. So we'll start with the conscious brain. So your conscious brain is evolutionarily speaking, brand spanking new. Your prefrontal cortex sits like right behind your forehead. And this part of your brain is where this is where higher reasoning lives. So this is the part of your brain that can learn from the past. This part of your brain can travel. You can project your consciousness into the past or into the future. You can think about what you're going to do later or what you did yesterday. That's most creatures on the planet. I think humans are the only ones that can do this, right? So that's a really big thing. So you can literally use your thoughts to make plans for the future, and you can use those exact same thoughts to go and take lessons from the past. Now, this part of your brain is also the part of your brain that's been educated. It's the part of your brain that can read a spreadsheet. It's the part of your brain that can make a plan. The thing about your conscious brain is that it's highly dependent on the subconscious brain for the information that it gets. We have a part of our brain called our reticular activating system, and that filters information. So your subconscious brain basically feeds the conscious brain a lot of the information that it uses to make these decisions. Now, this can cause all sorts of financial, like, dysmorphias. There's flaws in mental accounting. Like, some of the flaws in mental accounting are that we view some money as real money and some money as extra. Like, so for example, if you were to go to the casino with $100, use that, get yourself up $100. You're going to spend the second 100 like it was pretend money. Oftentimes that happens. It's like, all right, well, that money was a win, so it doesn't matter. Or we look at gifts differently than we look at paycheck money, or we look at money from dividends differently than we look at money as gifts. So money is what's called fungible. Money is a resource that at $1, you can enter. Like, if I had $1 in this hand and $1 in this hand, it won't matter if I switch them. If I borrow a $10 bill from you, but I pay you back with 2 5s, you're not going to care. It doesn't matter because money's fungible. You're not going to expect the same dollar back. You know what I mean? You're not going to expect that same bill back from me. So mental accounting it's highly flawed because of the information that we get. And so sometimes there's processes like confirmation bias and excuse me for a second. I like a tickle. All right. So your conscious brain also requires a lot of glucose. It requires a lot of your brain's like gasoline or your power. And so it's really not on all the time. A lot of times your subconscious is really running the show and your conscious brain just kind of picks up sometimes. And so the thing about financial decisions is we give the conscious brain way more credit than it deserves. In financial decisions, your conscious brain basically has the capability to set the GPS of where it is that you want to go. But in terms of actually executing on those goals, almost none. Willpower's not strong enough to get you there. And so you have to get your unconscious brain on board to do a lot of the things that you want done. All right. So the subconscious brain is it's far bigger and far stronger than the conscious brain. And so this part of your brain is in charge of one of the things that we'll talk about is your amygdala response. So that's a fight, flight, freeze response. Now, your amygdala is basically in charge of keeping you alive at all times, right? Like, it's scanning the world for danger. That response, that fight or flight response, we'll talk a little bit more about later, but that response will be triggered for scarcity because your brain sees that as a threat of starvation. Scarcity is a very real threat to your brain. That's why the idea of a bill can set you into such a panic, right? Like, most people have an intense scarcity response, and that's because it's an amygdala response. So another part of your subconscious brain that's really important to talk about is called your reticular activating system. Now, the reticular activating system is the part of your brain that filters all of the bits of information that are available into what you can construct as to reality. So the way that I like to explain this is, if you've ever decided you were going to buy a new car and you don't have the car yet, but you decided you're going to buy it, you start seeing that car everywhere. You start seeing it on the highway. You start seeing it in your neighbor's driveway. You're like, the car that you'd never noticed now starts showing up to you 15 times a day. That's because now your reticular activating system is programmed to see it, because you've decided something about this. You've decided that this thing is important to you. And so that decision programs that part of your brain to start to see all of the opportunities that you can see that thing. So your reticular activating system, as we get into this book, is basically the thing that's going to see the opportunities. So when we get into setting goals, you'll see that boring, realistic goals are harder to achieve than outlandish, crazy, wild goals. And the reason is the reticular activating system, because when you set realistic goals that don't actually excite you, your reticular activating system is like programmed like weak sauce. Like it doesn't really care. It's like, okay, you want to go to the lake next summer? Great. When you tell that thing the truth and it really gets programmed, you're going to see opportunities that you would have missed, even though sometimes financially it can seem unrealistic. What I find is that when it comes to achieving goals that involve money, a lot of times the goals don't actually need to be realistic to be achieved, even though that sounds counterintuitive. All right. So your subconscious brain is also in charge of your emotions. So your emotional state is subconscious. And so there's a lot of communication between the body and the brain in regards to emotional states, right? Like there's definitely a physical sensation for scarcity, physical sensation for love, right? Like love in your body feels very different than hatred in your body. And so your body and brain communicate back to each other about this. So like when you're in scarcity, when you're actually freaking out about money, the signal received in your body is starvation. So one like thing that happens with clients that's wild, because we don't work on this at all, is weight loss. A lot of my clients, like enough where it's worth it to mention, lose a lot of weight in our time together, even though we don't work on diet, we don't work on exercise, we don't work on food choices at all, like not even a little bit. But once they start getting out of scarcity, that starvation signal, if your body thinks you're going to starve, it's going to eat at every opportunity. My clients will call that stress eating. And then your body's going to want to hang on to every single calorie because you're telling it that you're in a state where you may starve. So your emotions play a huge role in your financial and all of your decisions. But your subconscious brain is also going to be in charge of efficiency. So that's where your habits are going to live. So habits run on a loop that starts with like the habit trigger, a routine, and a reward. And so once you do something a good few times, your subconscious brain is going to go ahead and just program that in as a habit loop to run when that trigger happens. So let's say you drive to work every day. Have you ever had the experience of getting in your car, you were going to go to the grocery store someplace else, you stop paying attention for a second and you're at your office? That's evidence. The trigger was there, the habit loop got triggered, even though you were going to go someplace else, right? Or you ever drive someplace before you dropped your kids off and then you had to like turn around and go drop them off? That's the sort of thing that happens. And so your subconscious brain is also really in charge of what gets powered in your brain. And so an amygdala response will shut down like glucose to the prefrontal cortex, which makes, for interesting decisions and scarcity, as we'll see as we go on. And so your subconscious brain is also in charge of your body movements, like literally like your physical movements. So if you've ever been in the car trying to avoid going through the drive-through and you go in anyways and you're like, I just said I didn't want that coffee. I just said we were going to save the $5 and now I'm in the drive-through. That's a disconnect between your conscious and your subconscious mind. So the thing that you want to understand is that these two different parts of your brains, this two different part of the exact same brain has different motivations. Your conscious brain wants growth. It wants prosperity. It wants logical things. It wants It wants your life to be better tomorrow than it is today. It wants to feel significant. Like there's a lot going on there. But your subconscious brain, the first thing that it wants to do every day is keep you alive. And so that means to your subconscious brain that you're going to live, that your subconscious brain, in an attempt to keep you alive, wants to know exactly what you're going to be doing. And it wants to keep you in a place that's familiar because it already knows how to manage your life in a place that's familiar. Now, the zone of familiarity, most people will refer to as a comfort zone. And your comfort zone can totally suck. You can have a comfort zone that you hate. You can have a comfort zone of scarcity, of bad relationships, of place that you don't want to live, of a job that you hate. You can have a comfort zone that's there, or a zone of familiarity. And even though you hate it, it's familiar to that subconscious part of your brain. Your subconscious brain knows that it can survive scarcity. It knows that it can survive a crappy relationship, or housing that you don't like, or boss that you hate, or whatever else. It knows that you can survive this because it's been familiar before. So this is the first big disconnect, is that your conscious brain wants to grow. Your conscious brain is always going to want to push you outside of your comfort zone, because everything that is growth is outside of the realm of what you already exist in. It's something new. It's something exciting. It's an adventure. It's a journey. But your conscious brain is like, no thanks. We'll just stay here on the couch. There's no need for us to move forward here. And so this is one of the first big disconnects. And this happens financially, because when you're trying to save money, when you're like, that's a whole different ecology you want to be moving into. And your subconscious brain, which is funny, also likes to avoid pain and seek pleasure. And so if you can tap into that and start to get these two different parts to your brain to start connect, you're going to be much more powerful in your ability to do that. So we could actually take a couple minutes to talk about starting to get these two different parts of your brain connected. So one way that is highly effective is journaling. I give my clients a lot of journaling assignments, because the subconscious can speak through the body without necessarily having to get through that. It's not the same typing. A lot of times you'll have to physically write stuff out, but you can start to see where these thoughts are. You can start to see where your subconscious is. Now, another thing to pay attention to is the physical sensations of emotions in your body. When you start to have awareness around your emotions, and you start to include things like that into your decision making, you can address the real root cause. So let's just say, for example, the idea of asking for a raise at work makes you feel guilty, makes you feel like you don't deserve it, makes you feel bad, wrong, like you're going to be taking money from someone else in that same company that could be having it. That is not a common sense choice to make. Of course, common sense would say, well, ask for the raise. Duh. But your emotions might not match that. And so if you have emotions of guilt, you have to really ask yourself, well, what about this makes me feel guilty? What about asking for a raise makes me feel guilty? And you might find that you actually feel like you don't deserve money. Or you might have a story from childhood that said, well, if I ask for this, my brother doesn't get that. Sometimes we grew up in situations where things weren't fair. The entire world's not fair, but sometimes these old stories that we have affect our emotions today. Sometimes we'll have a story that happened 20 years ago that literally affects our emotions today. So you want to start to be the gentle observer. You want to start to use your consciousness to observe your thoughts, to observe your emotions, and to observe your decisions, to observe like, well, what kind of choices am I making? So that's one way that you're going to start to build the relationship between your conscious and your subconscious brain. The next thing that you really want to do is you want to have goals that your subconscious brain can get on board with. Now, I will tell you that one of the biggest obstacles to achieving, big financial goals is setting really boring goals. Clients will tell me, Brie, I want to have $10,000 in my bank account. For what? Well, for no reason. I want to have it unearmarked. I just want to have $10,000 so I can feel secure. So the thing about that is money's about choices. Money's about trade-offs. And so when you say to your subconscious brain, who speaks an abstract language, your subconscious brain doesn't speak English the way that your conscious brain does. Your subconscious brain speaks in pictures and images, and it feels the emotions. And that's really how the subconscious brain communicates. So when you set a goal like that, and your subconscious brain is looking at it and they're like, so wait, you want to have pieces of paper in a bank account that we don't use, that don't have a purpose, and you want me to give up chicken wings and margaritas and fun today to be able to have that? That doesn't make sense. No, we're going for chicken wings today. Car into the margaritas parking lot. Done and done. So you have to tie. One of the big things that I want you to start to take away is that you have to tie your goals to something that your subconscious brain can get on board with. So that means that your subconscious, you want to use the subconscious brain's ability to avoid pain and to seek pleasure. That's one of the first things. So you want to think about your goals in a way that's going to make your life more pleasurable. Right? You want to have more freedom, more time, more luxury, more delicious foods, organic, whatever. You want to start to do that, and you want to start to mentally disassociate with the pain of whatever it is not having said thing is, to the pleasure of having said thing. You also want to start to think about things from an emotional level. Like when you set your goals, does the idea of having $10,000 in your bank account make you feel excited, lit up? Probably not, because the idea of having, if somebody said to you, I want to buy a truck and leave it in the garage, never take it out, never use it, just leave it in the garage, you'd be like, that's not what a truck is for, weirdo. But we set goals like that with our money. We're like, oh, I want to have money in my bank account that's not earmarked for anything. Why? Because it's an odd way to look at a resource. Another big thing about money that's super problematic is the idea that money is an end goal. Money is never, ever, ever an end goal. Money is a means goal. And so that's really what you want to, if your conscious brain will set money goals like having the money is the end goal. Your subconscious brain can't get on board with that. You have to set the goals for what it's going to do for your life, so that way it's interested enough to get the money. So for example, if you were to say to yourself, well, I want to travel, I want to experience the delicious foods, I want to go see the beautiful places, I want to sniff the gorgeous air, the flowers, I want to feel free, I want to feel a sense of awe when I go look at these buildings. This is the experience that I want, and it's going to cost $10,000. You're much more likely to be able to make choices with your money to be able to accumulate that $10,000 to be able to buy that life experience. So as you're setting your financial goals, one of the most important things that you have to do is to tie them to the life experience and really be keep your eye on that prize, not the money, which is an interesting, that's the better way to do it. So if you want, money in your kids' 529 accounts, and that's a long-term savings. I mean, if your kids are little, you want to think about it you want to have some sort of positive emotion when you put the money in, and you want to think about them 20 years down the road in their cap and gowns, or, think about them moving out of your house or whatever, whatever makes you feel good about that. So when you're setting your goals, you want to make sure that your subconscious is on board. And then as you get into it, you're going to run into challenges with this. This is why that's why even in the richest country in the world, I have clients who make enough money to be incredibly, incredibly wealthy, but they live basically in like super high class poverty. And I see that in the middle class. Like there's such a thing as middle class poverty. And it's because we spend every dollar that we make, and we still don't feel a sense of well-being in our financial lives. And we still chase money. So you're still going to run into challenges. And so as we get into this book, I'm going to teach you the levels of personal financial power and what that means. And so you're still going to encounter some self-doubt about, achieving your goals. You're still going to experience some resistance. And so part of that communication that you want to have between your conscious and your subconscious brain is going to be around like changing your judgments about things and overcoming a lot of fear. Because your subconscious brain, whose job is to keep you alive, when you ask it to go out of its zone of familiarity, it's scared. It's scared because it doesn't know that you can survive here. And so even though things may be looking way better on the up and up, that can totally set your brain into a tiz. You'll see this. I have clients who've gotten inheritances and freak out. Like they can turn a huge windfall into scarcity rather quickly. Like it's amazing. And it's because it's something way different. That account wasn't built up over time. It was like, your whole life you have $5,000 in your savings account, and then all of a sudden you have 200,000. It's enough to cause that part of your brain to feel massively unfamiliar and freak out a little bit and have a lot of fear response. And when that's the case, you will do wild things to get rid of that money because it makes you uncomfortable. And so this is where being really kind and compassionate with yourself matters. So a lot of times when I'm working with clients, the way that we talk to ourselves really, really matters, because that subconscious brain who's in charge of everything, if every time you're communicating with it, you're going in with a whip and a chain and you're beating it up, it doesn't like it's not into that. And so you'll find yourself constantly mad at yourself because that part of your brain, it doesn't care what the conscious brain wants anymore. And so the more that they communicate and the more that you use your conscious brain to take care of your subconscious brain and your subconscious brain to take care of the conscious brain, the more you're going to be able to grow in your, not just in your financial realm, but in your wealth is a measure of well-being. The word wealth actually is derived from well-being. And you want to think about well-being in your, in your finances, but also in your personal health, in your relationships, in your physical spaces, in the life that you have, the quality of life that you have. So when we think about prosperity, if you have financial prosperity, but unhealthy relationships, like how good is your life? If you have financial prosperity, but but you worked 65 hours a week your entire life to be able to get it, and now you're sick because your body never had a chance to rest, would you win? Like you didn't win anything. So wealth is a measure of those things. And I will tell you that what I see with clients is that if we have drains in our personal lives, it will start to be a drain in your financial life. I've seen clients after they're divorced, the divorce may have only costed a few $1,000s, but their financial damage will be so much more. I've seen clients get sick and the financial damage doesn't match the cost of the medical bills. The damage is far greater. And it's because when we feel bad about something, we'll use money to try to plug that hole. And it happens a lot. So like if you're feeling insecure, chances are you're going to go buy yourself some makeup or a pretty dress to quell that feeling of insecurity. So this is really where taking note of those emotional states really matters in your financial lives. All right. So in the next chapter, we are going to talk about the connection between personal power and personal finances. Do I want to take a break? I think I'm going to take a break. So I'm going to wrap up here for right now. I love you. I appreciate you for hanging out with me while I'm delivering the content for this book. Thank you so much. And I will probably be live again shortly. I'm going to take a little break. Okay. See you later.